In this video, we're going to look at character rigging for animation in After Effects. You open After Effects, and I've already got one composition up here, which is eventually what you want to get to. These are all rigged. You can actually see, for example, you can take the rotation tool and move one of these things. You can see that one's rigged. Okay. So what we need to do is, I'll just get the selection tool there, is you want to go into composition, new composition, and you got to make sure that this here is the pixel size, or whatever pixel size you choose. This is just the same as what this one here is. So you go okay, you can call that rigged man. Go okay, and it'll show up here, and that's your screen. And then what you want to do is actually drag in your rigged man, the PSD, the entire thing, and drop it in there. So you get this come up saying rigged man PSD editable layer styles. Make sure you leave it as editable, and then composition retain layer styles, and then you go okay. So we will use the rigged man composition. Now we open up the rigged layers. You don't want the background, you actually want the head downwards, and then you drag this into the timeline, and they all show up here. Now you want to have kind of a better background than this, so what you do is you create a new solid, and it just happens to be a nice pink. We'll take that one. It's a good background to work with. You go okay, and it automatically puts it on top, and that's not what you want. So you want those all in the bottom there. And then what you want to do is put these all in order. So you want the torso on the top, then the head, and then you want the upper right arm after the head, and then the lower right arm, then the upper left arm. That goes right over the lower left arm, and then the upper right leg, and then the lower right leg, and then the upper left leg, and then the lower left leg. Okay, now what you want to do is take all these body parts and move them out. Put the head above there, take these body parts, kind of move them up more or less where the direction they would go. Swap these two. Put that one more or less where you want it. And then what you need to do, each one of these, you have to switch here. There's a little tab there. What that is, it says pan behind, but what it means is you can move the anchor point. So you click on that, and for each one of these, you decide where you want the anchor point. And for the torso, you could leave it in the middle. It depends how you want to sway it. I'll show you the difference here. So there's your anchor point there, and if you take the rotation tool, it's going to rotate right on that anchor point. So if you move the anchor point, I just want it up here because that's how I want it to turn. You'll see that when you turn it, it'll swivel from there. And the same thing with the head, is you're going to want it to swivel from the neck there. So on all of them, you put the anchor point where you think the joint would be. And you can move that later if you decide you want to fine tune it a little bit. But right here, for example, is I think where the knee would be. You have to move that a bit just to get to this one. And then you move the anchor point to there. So again, when you want to rotate these, you'll see they'll all rotate on that pivot point. Okay, now get your selection tool again and move them all. Oh, you don't want that one. Okay, there's your torso. You can move it into place. Okay, now the next thing that you need to do is that you need to parent various objects together. So for example, if I took the torso and I want to move everything, but I move the torso, it would just move on its own. So what you can do is you can connect these together. The torso is going to be your main parent. So what you have to do with the head, click on the head, and then there's a little kind of a spiral here, and you drag this over to torso. And then you see right here, it'll say torso rigged. So now if I want to take that torso and move it, it will have the head connected to it. Now, of course, you don't want to connect everything to the torso, but the limbs that where they're touching, you do. So you would take, again, the upper right arm, and you would parent that to the torso. And the upper left arm, you would parent that to the torso. And the upper right leg, you would parent to the torso. And the upper left leg, you would parent to the torso. So you make sure all those are parented to the torso. And then the lower left arm, you want to parent to the upper right arm. So that way, you see, if you do something with the upper right arm, let's say you want to just turn it, it'll turn both of them. But if you just want to turn the lower left arm, it will then turn on its own. But you'll never turn the upper right arm without the left arm turning with it. And that's kind of the key to all of this. So then the lower left arm, of course, connects to the upper arm, and the lower right leg to the upper right leg, and the lower left leg to the upper left leg. And now you've more or less rigged your figure for animation. And now you can test each one of these to see if they rotate as you like. And then if you want, before you start moving the cursor, decide if you've put the joints exactly where you want. So you could get your rotation tool and then take each arm or each limb and move it a little bit. Now, one of the things you can actually do with each one of these, if you use the pointer tool, you can kind of shrink and stretch certain things. So you could take this lower leg and you see there's this box here. And again, if you have the rotation tool, you can rotate, but if it's just the pointer tool, you can make these shrink or grow, and they will always pertain to that anchor point there. If you actually had the anchor point in the middle, they would shrink and grow in a different way. Or you can make them grow thicker or thinner. That won't really work with limbs, but that's something to know. Now, one thing that I didn't do is I didn't make separate hands and feet and things like that, just because that would be an extra additional amount of work. But you can still use the pin tool that we looked at previously, and you could take lower right arm and you could add these pins. So you could make the hand kind of wiggle a bit, and if you really want, you could put the starch pin tool a little bit there in the middle so it doesn't quite spin so much. And the more anchor pins you have in there, the less it will actually move. Now we could go to the lower left arm, highlight that. You want your puppet pin tool. Again, you can make your hand move a little bit. You could also do that with your, here we get your lower right leg, and you could anchor it however much you want, and then you can move that a bit. But you might need to put an anchor up top there. Now that doesn't affect the other rotation tools. For example, if I put pins in here and I want to twist the torso, it doesn't take all the things that are actually connected to it with the parent relationship. So that's a separate tool. So once you've determined that all of these are what you think are in the correct place, then what you could start doing is going to all the transforms, and with the anchor point you may not want to anchor that down into one, but anything like position, scale, rotation, you can put the key points in there. So it takes a little bit of work to rig everything, but that way once you have the key points in there. Now, if you ever want to change the anchor point, always make sure that your cursor is back to 0. Now they're all ready to go. and you've got all your keyframes activated. So let's say you want things to move. Now you could move this a little bit ahead, and let's say you could take this, move it out a little bit, perhaps take this one, move that way. You could see you'd probably want your anchor point in a slightly different place, but those are things you can fine tune on your own. And then we'll do the upper parts here. You can move your whole body when you get the torso. So now if you want, you could start doing things like making some of them shorter, other ones a little bit longer. Work a little bit more with the rotation here. You could swing that in a lot more. Like I say, there's a lot of fine tuning you can do with these to make sure that you get it right at the beginning, and you could bring it back to the beginning point to recalibrate all of these, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. So I probably left a little bit too much of that stuff on there. So you could just take this thing also. You could even move the anchor point around a little bit. So to animate this, you can keep moving your cursor along and then including new movements. I'm just doing it randomly here, but I would expect that you have a much more structured movement to your character. And then you could include in the animation maybe a foot twisting out or something. So you can kind of move it a little bit like a puppet.